here is our API we are going to be using to get books. Okay, so this is googleapis.com, books like such, and you can pass a query. For instance, if you want Android books, you can say Android, you hit enter, then we should get a payload containing Android books. So there's a lot of books. You can see total items, that's the number, and you can see we have an array, a list containing all of the books, right? So these objects are the books, right? So this is what we're going to do. And if you want to say Flutter, as an example, you can click there and you can see we have books containing books about Flutter. And the great thing about each one of these books object, right, it contains a few data points there, properties of kind, e-tag. We are going to be interested in some of these properties, not all of them. But the most important one is going to be volume info, and inside I have the title of the book. Authors is an array or list. In this case, there's only one person or one author, but it could be more than one. Their publisher, published date, and of course we have description. So we're going to be able to pull in an actual book and then make that into an object. To do so, we're going to use the help of Retrofit. Retrofit is a type-safe HTTP client for Android and Java. So this is really helpful because it kind of abstracts out all of the complexity that come with trying to do HTTP requests in Android, in development in general. So I really encourage you to use Retrofit. It's really simple to set up, as you will see. And if you've been following us along, we've done this a few times, but I'm just going to show you a few things along the way so that perhaps you can brush up on this. All right, so we need, of course, to add this dependency. A few dependencies, I should say. If you scroll down here, you'll see it will tell us, this document will tell us a few other things that we may need in order to actually be successful at getting the information, the JSON, into our apps so we can connect that to our objects. So we will need JSON serialization library for that. So let's go ahead and set that up. So back to our project, I will go to our build Gradle, that app. As you can see, just go to the second one that says that app. What I will do is I'm going to add some dependencies there. So we have them already. Again, you won't need to pause this video and type all of this. You should have access to all of this in GitHub, because you should have access to all of the code for this course. All right. So what do we have here? We have Retrofit, which is the library we added, and we have OKHTTP. Essentially, is another library that works with Retrofit to do those calls, right? HTTP calls to the server, in this case our API, to get information. So just helps a lot. And then we have this JSON converter also, which works with JSON and so forth. All right, let's go ahead and sync. All right, so if we look at our payload here, our API, this JSON, there's a lot of information. So we need a way to transform this into a module that we can use as an object, a Kotlin object, so that we can have some sort of like a book per se. Okay, so there's a lot of things here. So what you want to do really is just copy this link so we can automatically create those model class. I'm going to copy this and let's open our project. Let's go to our models, right click there. What you want to do is you want to right click and say new. You will have this option of saying Kotlin data class file from JSON. So click there, okay? And then right click inside here, from retrieve, in this case, retrieve content from HTTP URL. This is what we want to do, and then we're going to paste that URL as such. Say OK. May take a few seconds. So it pulls in the entire payload, and so this plugin is really helpful because it will go ahead and create all the classes that it needs, that structure that we need, so that we can then have objects or classes, in this case, that we can turn them into actual objects to represent this JSON tree. So let's give it a name. You can name anything you want, but I'm going to just call this book, like that. Say generate. I'm going to take a few seconds, and voila. You can see it went ahead and generated a bunch of classes here. So what it did really, it looked at this entire tree and looked at the relationship. So it looked at, for instance, these items. It said, okay, we have first of all this object, all right, curly braces there, and then we have this property. So it created one object that will enclose everything. And then it looked at all of these properties, added all of that, and then it looked at, for instance, this items. It looked at it and said, okay, this is a list. Okay, a list of what? Well, it's a list of objects. So create another object and did for all of that. That's the reason why we see all of these different classes, right? Now, if you go to book is going to be the central of everything. So book, in this case, like I said, is going to be this whole payload here. You know this because you see there's kind as property and there's total items as property. Is that true? Indeed. There's total items, and there's kind, and there is the items, which is a list of item. If you control or command click, in this case, we can click this item here. It's going to be what? Each one of these items inside, which incidentally, it's our book per se, okay? So it should have kind, ID, tag, and volume info. Let's see, all of that, and we have the value info. The value info, of course, is a type of volume info. So if I go back here, it's going to have that value info. If I double click, voila, value info. That's where we have our authors. That's where we have the description, image links, and so forth. So it created all of that for us. Okay, we got back to this. Let's clear things up here. And the next thing we want to do, let's create a constant class, right? So let's go to utils, command new. I'm going to create a Kotlin class. This is just going to be, let's make it an object so that it's easy to manage. Call this constants. Okay. So what is our constants going to have? Well, for now, we're just going to have going to say const val here and call this base underscore URL like this. And let's go to our browser. I'm going to copy that. First of all, I'm going to add all of it in comment out line there and paste it again there. This is the base. We want to have a base URL, and you will see once we start putting together Retrofit and so forth. So Retrofit wants the base URL so that then we can pass queries into Retrofit to get the data we want. What this means is all of this needs to go. I'm going to get rid of all of that, and all I have is just this last / after v1. Okay, because all of this is actually a path, and then we have a query, and we pass that query. Okay, and all of this is going to happen once we are dealing with Retrofit, and Retrofit will need these pieces of information to go and fetch the correct data. So that's all, our base URL done. Okay, next, what we need to do is let's go to our network, and we need to create a new class here, Kotlin class, and this is actually going to be an interface. We're going to call this books API as such. What this will do, it's almost like a DAO. Really, that's what it is. So it's data access object. This is going to be responsible for creating the infrastructure that will connect to our Retrofit and get information, right? In this case, get books and so forth. Right, so we're going to append or add this add singleton to say this is just going to be a singleton class, singleton from Java FX as such. So now I'm going to say at get as such, and what is it I'm going to do here? Well, I'm going to pass a value. Now this at get is going to be from somewhere. I'm going to import, and this value I'm going to pass is volumes. Okay, you'll see in a bit here. Let's say suspend function, and we'll call get all books as such, and then I'm going to say at query, Retrofit query like this, and I'm going to pass the query character such as this, and then I'm going to say query for Retrofit. It's going to be actually a string, we're going to be passing, and we expect to receive a book. Ooh, there's a lot of things here. First of all, let's make sure this get is actually, I'm able to, has to be at get, like this. There we go. All right, so let's go and import that. So what we're doing here is very simple, is that we're saying get, this is from Retrofit, we say volumes. So essentially, we're going to append these volumes in our path, right? And then I'm going to say Q for the actual query, say query, and then I'm going to say what is the query we're going to pass. So it's going to be a string that we are going to be passing through via our search bar that we created. Okay, this doesn't belong there. And this will return a book. What is this book? Command click. It's going to be this whole payload, really, because you see here we have items, kind, and total items. The order is a little bit different, but that doesn't matter. Okay, so we are saying we're going to get this entire payload when we search for something. All right, we need to get, say something else. I'm going to say at get again, retrofit. I'm going to say suspend. We need to pass suspend function because we want to make sure that we are using coroutines and so forth so that we don't run these processes on main thread. At get here, I'm going to pass something here. The value is going to be volumes. Now I'm going to pass /. This is going to be a query. So I need to go to a path. In this case, I'm going to pass an ID, which is going to be a book ID. So this is going to be used for when we want to actually query book ID. We'll see in a bit. Book info as such. And now I'm going to say add path, because it's just going to be a path that we're going to have to go to in order to get that information. So in this case, I'm going to pass the book ID as the parameter as such. It has to be exactly the same that we passed there. And then it's going to be book ID. It's going to be a string value, and we expect to get item. Now remember, it has to be our item from our model classes. And what is this item again? We click, it's going to be this item, which will contain, of course, at the end, the volume info, which has the information of our book. So we're saying now we're going to go and get one of these. So now that we have our Books API, or DAO, we need to do what? Well, we need to go to our module, app module that is, and here we're going to create a provider for it. Right? Makes sense. Singleton, and then pass at provides, and then I'm going to say fun provide book API as such. And this function is going to provide a books API. So it's going to, in this case, return, in this case, a books API. So I'm going to go ahead and say the body. I'm going to say return. This is where I'm going to set up. This is where I'm going to set up our retrofit, because we need to create the actual retrofit object, which will be able to get to our API and do all the work that it needs to do. All right, so I'm going to return here. I'm going to say retrofit, okay, dot builder, okay, and then I'm going to pass, say dot base URL. I'm going to have to pass the base URL. We call this base URL. Let's say URL. We'll have to import that, and then we're going to continue. We're going to, let's just say constant that base URL. That would have worked because I'm sure it just imported our base URL. So let's just get rid of that. Okay, so let's continue to build our retrofit object here. And then I'm going to add this converter factory, because we need to convert what we're getting into objects that we can then attach to Kotlin, right? So we can have Kotlin objects. So we're going to use the JSON converter factory and create that. And then we're going to build. And then we're going to say create. Once we build, we're going to create what? We're going to create that service. In this case, it's going to be our books app class.java, like this. So now this is going to provide our books API, which you can see it knows how to then go and get, for instance, a query we pass a query, and then we get a book object, right? And then later we can also pass it a book ID and get that book item.